Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on which time zone you are at the moment. It's so great to see familiar faces as well as new joiners dialing into this very special team coaching circle today. My name is Agla Holt, and I'm a team coaching practitioner and host for Team Coaching Circle. And before we begin and dive into the exciting content today, I wanted to share a few housekeeping notes. So first of all, this session is being recorded. We'll share the recording after the session. We also made a decision not to admit the AI note takers. So Fabio, thank you, Fabio, for all your support behind the scenes, is going to decline those. We want only live humans so that we have the right numbers and people and breakouts, and the whole logistics is a little bit lighter. For those who is joining us for the first time, I'd like to very briefly share what Team Coaching Circle is all about. So Team Coaching Circle was created to bring team coaches together as learners community. And this community, in a way, goes beyond the specific school or particular discipline or even accreditation body. It's open to all, the space for exploring the field of team coaching. We meet monthly, we exchange the knowledge, we share the tools, we explore team coaching case studies, and it's also a great opportunity to build new connections and discover potential opportunities for partnerships beyond this circle. This initiative is supported by ICF Ireland chapter, and as a reminder, at the end of today's session, you can claim your CCE units if you wish so. And I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce our very special guest, Dr. Dorothy Siminovitch. Dorothy, thank you for joining us today.
So, Eglish, I follow you.
I just wanted to kind of to share, Dorothy, that it's a true highlight for me personally, and I'm so excited to see what we are going to co-create together in the next hour. For those who might not know Dorothy, Dorothy's incredible work, I wanted to share a very brief introduction, right? So Dorothy is a globally recognized Gestalt coaching pioneer. She's an international leadership, team and organizational coach, a mentor coach, a speaker, an author. She's also serving as a faculty for Hudson Institute of Coaching and is a founding director of training for Gestalt Coaching Program.
What?
Dorothy, as I said, very excited to have you on this call. And with that, I wanted to invite you to take the spotlight and get us started. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Egli. And I want to just welcome everyone. And in the presence of everyone, I just especially want to thank you, Egli, for the way that you have leadership for this community and for the learning goals and aspirations of this community. I think you are a bridge to the world, and I think you're so welcoming. So I just want to thank you for the welcome and also for all the previous speakers. My sense is that so much richness has occurred. So to everyone, wherever you are, and I see some of our Turkish community on this call, I want to say hoş geldiniz to you from Turkey, living in Germany. But the world today is connected all over the world. Today I'm in the States, and I'm so excited to be with you. And I know that Ireland is, in many ways, for me and for so many people that I work with in Canada and America, there's something about Ireland that's like a dream of green and integrity and poetry and beauty. So I just want to say to that, it's just fantastic to be with you. And to those of you already working in teams and groups, I also want to welcome your expertise and I'd like to join you with a few thoughts about why ICF as a coaching phenomena and also the EMCC community and the world are embracing teams and groups so strongly. And I think for many people, if you remember this phrase from the great anthropologist Margaret Mead, who said, I think it was somewhere in the mid 20th century, she said, never doubt that a group of committed uh, people working together can change the world. So it has been, indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So the idea of people working together in commitment towards change is an idea that has um, almost, almost a century of belief that it works. And through our civilization, people working together is something that we believe to have social change, but also an organization. So, I'm thinking of the great work in England done at an institute called Tavistock, which is understanding how groups work together with authority. In America, it was the efficiency movement in the early 20th century. But teams of people working together has been a configuration that has been fascinating psychologists and organizational psychologists and management thinkers. Why? Because people working together is an answer to how to meet the complexity of our world. And as the world has increased in complexity, the need for people to come together to a collective, shared solution is actually important. So, of course, the world knows that I'm talking and it's calling me now. Hello. And now I see all of you. Okay. So, what do I want to show you actually for the first slide is a wonderful image that I think is fantastic. And that is, this was adapted to a slide that I saw from a facilitator, but I loved it. And that is, as a group leader, what is it that we're looking for that can be known or seen? And that is what we're told about a group, the history of a group, and the purpose of a group. Wonderful. But then one of the things that we need to ask ourselves is, what is it that we don't see? That if we're coming to work with a group of people, that we should be thinking about. And here is all these other things below the surface of the water. You know, what is it that the group is looking for? What are the challenging dynamics? What is the diversity in the group? What are the invisible challenges that we don't know? What are people afraid of? In groups today, very often, if we're talking about what really helps a group of people together, it's baseline psychological complexity. And that means whatever I say or whatever I ask, I will not be humiliated or shamed. So leading groups today, and it's interesting, has become such an important figure, moving away from just individual coaching or adding to individual coaching, because it's a way of understanding how to respond to the complex challenges, but also with a diversity and richness and increased creativity that comes with a team of people working together. So in today's little time with you, I'd like to present you with a few ideas. And as I'm saying that, I'm very aware that this is so exciting to come together, all of us. So I'd like to have the next slide, Egli, and that is that the Gestalt approach, and I didn't ask you how many people have had some kind of familiarity with the Gestalt approach. It's only about 70 years of thinking in the worldwide community of psychology, of therapy, and as a approach to coaching, I'm proud to say that Gestalt coaching is now 20 years old or 25 years old. But the very core of the Gestalt approach is it's really coaching competency 7, how to evoke awareness for the client at the individual level, if I'm working with 2 people at the dyad level, if I'm working with a group at a team level. The idea of the client's insight and learning is an actual tool, and it's the technique of how to evoke learning or provoke learning is the kind of questions, the use of silence, the metaphors, or the analogy. And here's the interesting thing, if you go to the next slide, the power of the Gestalt approach. When people say, well, what is it about the Gestalt approach? And I don't know how many people practice meditation, mindfulness, but the Gestalt approach is, I'd like to say, is applied mindfulness. And what we are interested in is not telling you what you should do, but inviting you to become aware of something. And then the awareness, we think, is actually a wake up, an invitation to consider something. So, for example, when you ask a person, how do you feel? Or if you ask a group of people, how do you feel right now if you notice it's cold outside? And people start saying, I'm feeling a little cold. We know that one of the things that happens if people start becoming aware of feeling cold, they might go say, I need to get a sweater. Or if you say to people, anyone would like something to drink, and someone say, yes, I'm thirsty. The next request is, what can I get to drink? And very often, even just anything happening right now, anything anyone want to ask, and the question itself will provoke a little wake up of awareness. And what we really believe in is that it's the invitation to become aware that is what ignites change, okay? Or provokes learning. So that's what the very first thing, about even in being with you today to do, hello, how are you, the Gestalt approach to team development, we would like to invite you to consider a question that invites you to be engaged. So the second thing that's powerful about the Gestalt approach is we don't talk about, we invite you to be in, to be experiential together. So we don't give you a lecture, we say something, how do I engage you? So that's, I think, one of the other powerful pieces about the Gestalt approach is it's here, it's now, it's experiential. And the very first piece of being experiential today is to invite you to register at Mentimeter using the code that you see, 45574794. And we have a question that we'd like you to answer with just a few words, 1, 2, or 3. Go to menti.com. And the question is, what do you want from today's session? Because, you came here, your time is so valuable. If you could put a word or two, wonderful. Wonderful. Huh, exactly. Could you please send a link to Mentimeter here? There's a link. Yes, wonderful. Okay. Huh. Even as we're gathering, what you're seeing as you're gathering, thank you. The questions. Wonderful. Understanding. So just notice as you're looking at these answers, what in particular grabs you? Understanding is a large word, means that a few people have actually either said understanding. Learning is another large word. But there are other words. What is it that grabs you? And the reason I say that is for everyone here, one question people always say, well, really, what is Gestalt? And one of the things that I want to say to you is, it is, even as you're looking at this, because many of you are looking at this, actually, I'm not going to talk over. I'm going to give you one more 30 seconds just to look at this. Allow yourself just to take in what you're noticing. Take in what you're noticing. What in particular speaks to you. And I'm actually going to ask just a few people just to write down in chat what in particular speaks to you. I saw John Hannon, you put down learning. Anything in particular, use of self, wonderful. Anything else that grabs you, that you're interested? Application, awareness and inspiration, growth, insight, awareness. Yes. To breathe. Hi, Carolyn. Make it development. Brilliant. Brilliant. The reminder of a Gestalt model. All right. Wonderful. Egli, can we just close the PowerPoint for a moment? I'm just going to be with you for a moment. So I want to say to everybody, if you can see me, first of all, your responses are really thrilling and exciting. And if we just stayed with that, that would be wonderful, right? Because the answer to what we're looking for is in you. Our question is how to access this. So what you've just seen us do is we've used a tool called Mentimeter to ask you a question to get at the data of
I
what you
know,
want.
I'll stop this.
Hi,
This would
John.
make you,
So to get at the data of what you want, and that's actually what we call here and now data. So we don't ask about what was, we don't ask about in the future, because we believe the past is present and the future is in your aspiration in the moment. But what you just did, now I'm just going to start just a little piece of theory, and that is this. It's how you're paying attention. And we call that figure, a figure of attention. So for example, I'm going to give you a little tiny little overview of the Gestalt approach, and that is this. If you look at my hand, yeah, you see my hand, right? Now bring your attention to what's behind my hand, which is some very, very large urns. And if you could unmute yourself, what happens? I'm going to ask you a question. As you look at the urns behind my hand, what happens to my hand? Anyone want to say?
Goes out of
Kind of
focus.
disappears.
It goes out of focus, right? Okay. If you bring your attention back to my hand, what happens to the urn?
Blurry.
Exactly.
Focus changes.
Focus changes. And that is the very essence of the Gestalt approaches. What we pay attention to, it's not about reality, it's about what is in us. We actually act on our experience by directing our attention, either intentionally or habitually. Okay? So I'm just going to hold it. So just directing our attention to our background changes the figure of what is standing out for us. So very often, what we'll say as a coach is, what are you paying attention to? And sometimes when people are learning Gestalt, they'll say, what's your figure? So for right now, I'd like to invite you to look at something in that we practice a lot. And Egli, if I can invite you to bring in the picture of the cycle. And I can't, is my cursor working? We've just met together and we've asked you just to pay attention to what it is that you're looking for or wanting. And just notice that many of you wrote something down, and the things that you wrote were huge, actually. I want to a space for reflection. I want to breathe. I want to know the difference between coaching and therapy. I want use of self. Fantastic. It's not for an hour, it's for the next year of study. But the question is important because the question gets at what is big for you. It's not about me trying to manage how we do the hour. It's about me inviting you to bring in the largeness of your dreams. And even in a moment, asking an awareness question brings that in. So what we do is understand how to use ourselves as an instrument to invite you to use your awareness in the belief that awareness is where the work starts. And what you see here are 6 different awareness questions around the circle, but I'm just going to stay with awareness because here's what we also know. Whatever we say we want has kind of a shadow side. And I'm probably going to say something obvious, but when I say I want something, the shadow always is, and how do I stop myself from what I want? I want a space for reflection. The shadow is, I stop myself from that. And I speak for myself. I don't know who wrote that, but I join you in that. I want a space for reflection. If only I don't add so many things. Or I want to understand use of self. Now, what is it that gets in the way? So what we'd like you to do now, because engagement is so important in our work, is we'd like you now, we're going to invite you to go into a room. And the question, Egli, if you can bring in, we'd like you to meet 2 or 3 other people, and we'd like you to have a conversation with each other that says, well, you're just sharing really more than a conversation. What is it that I say that I want, and what gets in my way? And we ask you to share this in your rooms, and we're going to give you only 8 minutes. In 7 minutes, we're going to invite you to come back. Okay, well, I would just like to make it very okay to be either a little late or not in a room. However you are here, you're here. What I will tell you, is that, hi, Celine. What I will tell you is that those that were in a room were answering 2 questions, and that was, what is it that you want, either from today? Someone said from my whole life. I said, if that's what the question speaks to you, answer that question. And then the other question was, and what stops you? Because our theory is whatever we say we want, there's also, it could be a pattern of what stops us. I say, I want to lose 5 pounds. How do I stop myself? There is a way. I say, I want to become a very punctual person. I know how I stop myself. I always add one more thing before something else happens. I say I want to write a book. Oh, somehow I didn't wake up every day at 6 o'clock for that hour of writing. You see how this pattern goes? And so what we get very interested in is the small questions that we call a question. And what is the figure of want? And that's very powerful, important for the Gestalt approach, because the Gestalt approach is how to make the invisible visible. And want and need and what's missing typically is invisible unless we ask the question. Make sense? Yeah? So I wonder if we're all back. Egli, are we all back?
Yes,
No.
we are all back. Thank you, Dorothy. And apologies for the group which stayed in the main room. There are some technical issues, but we're all here, which is great.
Well, it's very interesting that you say that, Egli, because sometimes, and I used to get interested, there's we teach patterns of resistance, and that is, I've been calling them the archetypal patterns of resistance, because resistance always happens. And, what is the archetypal energy of resistance? But if you found yourself not in a room and you said, what's going on? I always say that to what's going on? My question is that familiar? Because even from that, we can get some awareness of what's going on. How do I take advantage, even of moments of confusion? So I just want to hold that. And I would like to be a little provocative about that, because in technology, it's very easy for these kind of things to happen. I would like to just have a few awareness statements from people in the rooms of the conversations. Anything as a either unmute yourself just from the conversation. What did you close that conversation with, either in curiosity or energy or surprise? What did you close the conversation with from your room? You'd have to unmute yourself. Matthew, you raised a question.
We talked about team coaching and moving from individual or
Yes.
a type of training-ish
Mhm.
type thing. But what came up for me was I'm trying to find people that I can help in business, because I'm a business mentor as well as a coach.
Of course.
And I just thought I'd put my name out there and take the opportunity, because we were talking about what's a hard sell and what's not a hard sell.
Exactly.
So what I do is I help people to get kind of more comfortable in the business world and finding new customers and stuff like that. So I just said I'd just put it out there. It's not a hard sell. I'm just putting my name out there. That's all. But
Well,
we
you know,
learned
Matt,
about team coaching as well. So
well, I'll tell you, there are some wonderful people now teaching how to work with teams, and I'm not supposed to be pushing or selling. I just want to say some of them are here today, and I just want to say I see you. But even that, Matthew, if you start inviting people and say, I'd like the 5 of us or the 10 of us to start talking, you've entered into the realm of team coaching. You've actually entered by expanding from the individual level to either the dyad, the subgroup, or the group level. So there's a numbers quality. I call that the boundary, but you got to know the boundary that you're going to. So if you're going to a group of people and you're asking a question, you're going from the individual to the team. So just to hold that, that's one of the distinctions, but you need to use your presence, Matthew, to go there. So I want to say to you, bravo. I also think, Maria, I saw your hand, and then we go to Sarah, and then we go to Jesse. Okay, Maria, are you there? Unmute yourself. Thank you, Matthew. I think we might have lost Maria.
Yes, no, no, I'm here. If you mean me,
I
if
do.
there's another Maria.
No, it's you.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
But I didn't have my hand raised. I just put a comment in the chat.
I know, but your comment was so loud. Could you say it?
Oh, all right. Yeah, I'm not alone, feeling
Exactly.
isolated, and we all share that our assumptions or fears can get in the way.
Huge.
So, thank you all for sharing in my
Yeah.
group.
Huge. I want to say I've been talking a lot in the world about loneliness. I think especially in a post-COVID world, the only good thing I can say about COVID is it made it okay for people to talk about isolation. And groups are a wonderful place to humanize to humanize that experience. And that's the medicine. So Maria, why I invited you is because it was so loud to me what you said and so shared. You
Hmm.
don't know that until you share that.
Well, I want to call out Carolyn, who actually shared it. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say, and thanks for her actually sharing with the group. I was like, "Whoa, this is a very wow moment for me." So I want to thank you,
Are we talking Carol?
Carolyn.
Are we talking Carolyn Duffy?
Oh, she, I think it was.
No,
He's
it's
talking about,
there's
yeah.
another Carolyn. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, not
well,
me.
I want to invite the other Carolyn and say welcome. It's such a big issue in the world today. Thank you. I just want to say thank you and just hold that and again, it is a figure of awareness. And it's also, we could expand on that. It's an example of how many figures we are holding when we talk about teams. So even if we can't work them, that we hold them already allows the work of the figure to happen. Awareness starts by almost gathering, just gathering with awareness starts the work. I'm going to invite one more. Sarah, thank you, Carolyn, and thank you, Maria. Sarah, you raised your question. Could you speak?
Good morning, Sarah Scala from Boston. She, her, hers pronouns. Glad to be here. Two things that I
Okay.
shared was the importance of awareness around organizational psychology, organization development when it comes to team coaching.
Sure.
I just find that to be incredibly helpful when it comes to team dynamics. The other thing that I shared was the usefulness of having an assessment for the team that's validated. One that I use is the Team Diagnostic Survey that comes out of Harvard Scholars that identifies 6 conditions that predicts 80% of team effectiveness. So again, having an assessment tool to talk about data, as well as awareness and understanding of IO or org behavior. Thank you.
So I want to say to you, it's so important what you just said. Thank you so very much. And why? Because there's so much complexity in teams. And it's, is it, an assessment of what's going on, assessment of the stage of development of the group, assessment of what hasn't been working? And the answer is yes to everything. But the key question is, and what now? And what now? And here's where, thank you so very much. I love um, I love that there's one question. I found the second part of the question was a bit that provoked. So before we go, Kate Rooney, could you say what was it that you were provoked by the second part of the question before we go to our next slide?
I thought, like, again, good questions are what makes coaching. And I thought, like, the first part of the question, what do you want, is a very typical question. But adding on the piece of what's stopping you is the bit that really turned it on its head. And I wouldn't have answered what I answered if I don't even ask the first part. I needed the second part of the question to take me where I went.
And what's your awareness of that? What was it about the second part that allowed you to answer it differently?
It brought awareness to what am I doing to stop myself? What blocks am I putting in place possibly? And if I had have just answered, what do I want? I might not have brought awareness to the block. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Well, and I will say this to you. We also know that asking a question in the context of being with others, it makes the question more powerful. So the importance of being heard by another person when you answer that, because as we know, it humanizes the question and somehow it unpacks the resistance because you were with three other people or two other people. Other people can share something about that pattern. Our resistance was created to help us move forward in the world, and sometimes it becomes old and outdated. And you don't change that until you actually can share that and begin working that. So I want to hold this. The best minds work in the presence of a question. Thank you, Nancy. I think where you reference that, it's absolutely, David, I got that. Wonderful. But I'd like to introduce this to you. We raised and we asked you some questions. And you know what? The universe actually first gives you a question, can I have this conversation? And you who have turned up are so rich in yourself that the questions you've presented are really, wow, we could spend the next 2 days together. We could be working this together. And wouldn't that be wonderful? But we're not going to, but I can tell you what we could do. And that is this next little thing that we're not going to be able to do today, but I'm going to show it to you. And Egli, if you can bring in the unit of work concept. Yeah, this is before, yeah. Well, actually, let's go back to the slide that you were at. Each of us, when we're working with others in a team or a group, by the way, a team is a group, not all groups are a team. When we share an identity, so Matthew, if the idea of how to work with a team around business, you can actually, if everyone shares that question, you can start saying you're a group. But if everyone shares, I want to get more business together, you become a team. But if I hear issues in a group, I bring my presence. And so those of you who are saying, how can I, and I think Lizette, you had this question. I loved it. I heard this. And you said, I bring myself, I've never done team coaching, but you've all had, everyone's been part of a group or a team somewhere. And the question is, how do you bring your presence and your use of self? And here are the different configurations, individual, group, the larger culture and the world we're part of. So even if you're not in Turkey, you may have heard of an event that happened in Turkey, and you know a lot of people are in pain. Or you're not in California, and you've heard about the fires. And you know even in your group where it might be neither, you can find yourself saying good wishes for people in different parts of the world. So our question for each of us as leaders or facilitators is, what do you want to be paying attention to? That you want to either invite people to respond to what's happening in you. Jasper had a question that was so fantastic. He said, is it what you want now or is it what you want in the big picture? And when I answered the question, he said, oh, very Gestalt. And I loved it because Jasper, you went back to your question. And that's what we want. We want to evoke a response that serves the person that we're with. But sometimes someone asks a question and we'd like to respond in a way that provokes an exciting response. And sometimes we have to use ourselves. So what's the presence we want to bring to inspire people working at the individual, interpersonal, or group level? And this is the concept I'm just going to introduce you to. The next slide, Egli. And Egli, we're gonna send out that chapter. We have a concept called unit of work. I call it uniting of work. So what we just did was we asked you a few questions, two questions. What do you want? How do you stop yourself? We call that assessing what is. And you shared that with your colleagues in the group. But if you wanted to work on that now, someone from the group would say, so, what do you want to pay attention to? So what do you want to pay attention to? And you want to pay attention of what gets in the way. So Kate, I just asked you something about what was the second part of the question. You said, only when I heard the second question could I answer the first question. So maybe we would want to work that with some kind of an experiment. Now, we don't know what it was, Kate, that you responded to, but we might have you talk it out, and we might have either an awareness experiment, or we might ask someone, Jasper had this question, and we'd say, so Jasper, ask yourself the question, and let's have a question where you answer yourself, or do you want to hear a response from someone in the group? And what happens when you are in a learning group together, even in organizations, you can ask people what gets in the way of this issue and what can people learn together about an issue. And we create learning experiences. And then because we don't want people to get tired, we stop an experiment. We may have an experiment. So in a group, for example, in an organization, people would say, well, I can't allow myself to brainstorm. That's my figure. I can't allow myself to brainstorm because I feel like it's not good enough. I'm in a high-powered environment and I don't want to offer because I'm worried. This is where psychological safety is so important. I'm worried that what I say is not good enough. So we invite the person, well, what right now, what's your figure? And maybe the activity of the team is respond back to the person who said, my idea is not good enough. Respond back to that person to let them know what was valuable about what they shared. Again, it's a tiny little experiment, but what you want to do is you want to close it out with what was the value of this? What got learned? And here's what we want to make safe. We want to make safe to learn together in a team because that's what evolves the experience of the teams. So our question is, what's different? What's changed? What's the learning? And I think the last thing I'm going to go to the next slide is this. When we're working in a team or with a group, this is what we always want to be asking. What's the figure that's standing out that's more relevant? And we've had some, 90, 100 people on the call today. Look at all the different figures that came out on the Mentimeter. What are the different figures that are happening? And what's the key figure that this group or team has responded to? Here's a question we always have to ask is, what was the level of system? I don't know. Is there a question? Hello? Is there a question? Okay. What's the level where the work is? Is it at the individual level? So people always think in a team, well, how do you work at the individual level? You actually go to the individual level and you say to a person, like I said to you, Maria, anything you want to say. Or you could say anything, Matthew asks a question, or Kate says something about resistance. It's at the individual level. But we also want to say from the whole group is anyone from the group want to say something back to the person who brought the figure. And we need to know what the culture is of the group that we're working with to know how courageous or difficult or different the figure is. So if I'm working in a culture, I just was working with a woman from Dubai, and the woman, in terms of her leadership, wants to do something specific that might be very challenging in the particular culture. So what do we want to know? We want to understand culture, and we want to understand what the figure is in relation to the culture. And the last thing that's so interesting in working in teams is, how different can I be that I can create connection? But if I'm too different, I will be perceived as weird. So this is what we call the PWI. If I'm different just enough, I create interest. If I'm too different, it's a weirdness. So your question as a group facilitator or leader is, what's my TWI? This is where entry behavior in a new group. What do you want to be doing in a new group? You want to create orientation. In a group that's been going on for a while, what do you want to know? You want to know what's working and not working. What's working and not working. And what's the question? Okay. So we have maybe a couple of minutes for any questions or observations as we come to a close. Questions, observations, takeaway.
Hi, Dorothy.
Yes.
I'm just struggling with the word figure. What's another word for figure?
Issue.
Issue. Thank you.
Issue or topic of relevance. Or and this might be a little bit cold, but I say data of relevance. So, the idea of taking an assessment and the diagnostics of assessment, wonderful. But an assessment of a group lies as well as what's the data of what's working in the group. Or even now, when you ask this question, what's a different word is what's clear and not clear is a piece of data. And what was figural right now is the word figure wasn't clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
What do you do, Dorothy, in a group when you have that one key narcissist that just doesn't really care about anybody else, but still has to be part of the team?
I can't see you. Tell me your name.
It's Matt here again.
Hi there,
Matt
Matthew.
the mentor is here again.
No, Matt, I love it. Well, so isn't it interesting that that question's coming repeatedly in the world? Because, I think the narcissists are very lonely. They come to the group because they need to have someone. I mean, it's a crazy thing for me to say in a way, but first of all, it's going to happen. And you don't need to be so there's a question about what's the difference between therapy and coaching. And a narcissist, in some ways, it depends how difficult they are, but that's a clinical term. But we think, is it a problem person or a person demands a lot of attention or a person dominating? So I'll say that in non-clinical terms. But the extreme narcissist, could be, you're not understanding me. That becomes, like it could be aggressive, but a person who's compelling attention. So one of the things you as leader, you as facilitator have to ask yourself, what's my comfort level from intervening? And sometimes the tips are when I have somebody in a group dominating the conversation. I know this is paradoxical, but this is a paradoxical theory of change. I might say the very obvious, thank you so much for sharing yourself. Can I invite you to hear from other people who haven't spoken? Or I notice a lot of people haven't spoken. Thank you so very much. Can I invite the other people to speak? So you actually want to use the data to see if you can actually invite that person to what we call suboptimize. You don't want to shy away from that. But how you say that, Matthew, becomes your use of yourself in a way that, do you promote connection or do you create aggressive response? See the difference?
Yeah, definitely. I
So
have
what
to jump off there. Good talking to you.
Say again?
I have to jump off. I have somewhere else to be. So
Thanks for your questions.
thanks. Bye.
Anyone else? Thank you so much.
Dorothy, I wrote this question in the chat box, so it's great to see you here. And I was wondering about what are the resources do you suggest for us to keep learning about the Gestaltic approach to team coaching? Where else we can go? Anything you have written or any other places we can go?
Well, my friend Damien from all over the world is what I have to say about you. First of all, I have a chapter on the Gestalt approach, and so I'm going to send this to Egli, and Egli will send it to you. So that's one thing. We run groups, we run training programs on this. And I think the interesting thing about this is where I think team coaching, what was that audio? I once did a team zone coaching had also a podcast that we did on the Gestalt approach. And so that was another thing. I think we need to do more writing. And I think also I did something on use of self in terms of managing our resistances. So very often I say, Damien, thanks for the question. One of the things that I say about working in teams is if you want to know about your presence and your use of self, lead a team. And why? Because in the diversity of a team, you will have to find in yourself is how much range do I have? How available am I to meet the diversity of the group? Also, a team is we need to do three things for a team, and I think it's really important. So this is where we need to know how to start a team, we need to know how to manage an issue, and we need to know how to close a team endings. So we need to also know how to set structure and boundaries. And the question is, what's my use of self in relation to facilitating a team? So I would say that as a way of responding to your question, and maybe more to come, Damien. Thank you. So wonderful, and so wonderful to have you here. But I'm aware of time, and I want to say this to you. If you have any other questions, contact me at my email. And also, please know that we have other trainings, and I'd like not to be pushy about it, but I'd like to invite you to these closing questions is, what's my comfort level in my use of self with a team? Do I feel I can, or do I feel I can't? Okay. And the reason I say that is I was a person many years ago who couldn't, and it's learnable. I used to call learning these skills the pragmatics of magic. Gestalt work to many people looks magical. It's actually learnable. You can learn how to use awareness, and you also learn how to use the question. But here's what you need to also learn in Gestalt work, the space that the question needs to be answered. What's the difference between a PCC coach and an MCC coach? It's the use of silence. And I invite you to learn how to use silence in groups, questions in groups, diversity in groups, and your own anxiety in groups. And thank you. And thank you for today. I'm left unfinished because I think that there's more. So many of you haven't asked a question. I invite you, ask the question. And if you think you'd like to have it answered by me, send me a note and I will respond best as I can. Egli, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Dorothy. But a perfect segue actually to share additional resources for all of those. This is a website where you can find Dorothy, gestaltcoachingworks.com. And if you're feeling inspired, Dorothy didn't mention that, but she has some great news. You will find that on the website. She's actually coming to EMEA region, and she will be holding a workshop in March on teams and groups working with application of Gestalt. So again, you will find that information on her website. And Dorothy, the figure which I'm taking out of it is it's a curiosity. There's a lot of curiosity, a lot of openness in the space now. So really appreciate joining us today and your generosity in sharing.